Hello. Please welcome to the stage Laurent Herbillon from BNP Paribas, Moran Levinovitz from HSBC, Michał Hojowski from Raiffeisen, and Szymon Mitoraj from ING Bank Śląski. I would like to have a little taste of our audience first, and ask you, everybody else, an important question. Do you think that there is any future for the banks? Do you think that in the future there are going to be banks? So if you think that the banks have a future, please raise your hand. Okay.
Oh, so
that's quite optimistic. So please raise a hand if you think that they don't.
We're living kind of a middle ground there.
With such an optimistic result, let's still discuss about how the banks prepare for the future and how they innovate. And let's start with a question, how the banks should innovate and should prepare for the future, but they are not so eager to do. And, well, let's discuss the ideas or the things that they should do, but they don't like to do. And let's start with Szymon.
Okay. I think the biggest challenge that goes with banks is to actually be very fast in innovating, right? So one of the major rules of innovation is fail fast. We as an industry, perhaps we are not the best example of people who fail fast, or to people who fail at all on that matter. We have a tendency to implement only things that are proven. Mm-hmm. And going back to the second part of the question, I think the biggest challenge that we should do and we don't do as the banks, you can divide into a few groups. In Polish market, you can find some banks, big one and medium one, that do struggle with digitization processes. So to get from manual processes to fully optimized digital processes. The other part of the banks, and I think ING is probably one of them, is that we have some legacy systems. Even though we are fairly advanced when it comes for digital processes and approach into future, it is always a difficult struggle in between when will you invest big pile of money into those things that do not create benefits in the short term. So the core banking systems, legacy systems, that changing is required, is extremely difficult, extremely painful cost-wise, and in the same time it's very difficult to justify in a short-term term because it doesn't create value in the short term. And on the other hand side, in the long term, if we don't do it, there will be a moment where the innovation will start to slow down even further.
Thanks. Moran, you came to us from London, and I know that London is all about the innovations and about the future, but are there any elements of the future of banking that you don't like or you are not so eager to prepare to?
No, I think it's an exciting time for banks. I think there's a lot of regulation coming out, a lot of change in customer expectations, which is actually a massive opportunity. We'll see how banks who have always, by the way, innovated in various areas, will need to stay on their toes and on top of their game and continue to build on a lot of the great resources and talent, distribution, and people that they have, so they can weather the tough competition out there from various directions.
But as I understand, banking of the future requires some new set of skills or abilities that ones need to have. And I wanted to ask whether you personally find any of those new skills difficult for you to develop.
Well, on a personal basis, I think everyone who's kind of managing their career needs to continuously evolve their skill set and change. So, because I think it looks like the pace of acceleration is just growing. It's like in 10, 15 years from now, who knows what we'll all be working at. So we all have to continue with skills, and the banks as well. And I mean, on HSBC front, the bank has an IT force of about 40,000 people. 10, 15,000 of those are developers, right? So we need to make sure we have the top, talent when it comes to a lot of the skill set that requires digital channels and services.
Okay, thanks. Michał, I wanted to discuss one thing with you now, because I know that you developed a startup for Raiffeisen Bank.
Yeah,
and I wanted to ask whether the fintech startups and the banks are enemies, competitors, or good friends and partners in certain ventures. How do you see it?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I'm working in a bank for 15 years, but for the last 3 years I was building a startup for a bank. It's a very complicated story, but yes, that's true. We have built a startup which is a kind of payment solution, a wallet with the payment schemes which are embedded in the solution. And yeah, I'm here in the two roles. And from the bank perspective, because I'm still working in a bank, it depends. The answer is it depends. In my opinion, when the startup is somehow helping the bank and is able to make his offer better for the customer, it's easier to cooperate with banks. Yes, it's become more complicated when you are competing with the bank. Yes, and our startup was somehow a competition for the bank. So it is really very complicated decision. But I think from the strategy of how the banks could behave in this complicated market environment, I think it might be also the solution. Yes, because in Raiffeisen we have a internet platform which is dedicated for the customers who are currently in a bank, and we decided to invest in a startup to build an alternative one. Yes, and the difference is that this banking platform is generally somehow connected with the banking license, which we know it's extremely expensive now because of the regulations. And on the other side, we have a product which is totally not branded, which is not branded with the Raiffeisen brand. It's called arcantor.com, and it's the solution which is dedicated for the people from outside the bank, and somehow the local bank can acquire the customer worldwide, in my opinion, because there is a payment license granted by local regulator, which is from the banking perspective much cheaper. So this example might be a kind of answer for the question how in the future banks can cooperate with the startups, not only buy them, not only watch them and try to copy the ideas, but invest and make by their own the startups. Yes, so yeah, this is a different perspective.
Moran, do I understand correctly that you want to add something, or?
No, I was thinking that it's actually what banks, in general, should be doing is taking risk and cannibalizing some of their own business. Because if a startup can, it might as well be one that you're involved with rather than one that you're not. So I think it's definitely a brave and the right approach.
Mm-hmm. And Laurent, how is your bank engaging with startups? Because I know that you have some startup bank cooperation and you're somehow responsible for it.
Yes, maybe to complete the previous answer, I think we have entered a new era. After the startup bashing, the startup love era, where doing a lot of PR and buzz, I think we are now in a phase where we want to do very concrete things with startups, and nobody is naive. I mean, sometimes they can be competitors, sometimes they can be providers, they can be partners. But we live in a very complex ecosystem, and we know that we need each other, to really move forward in that digital transformation. And I think we at BNP really now are in this new era of doing things, very concrete things, and we have launched several initiatives to make sure that we really, take all the benefits from working with startups. We do acceleration programs, but not for the sake of doing acceleration program. What we want to try to achieve is to identify pain points, issues that we can't solve internally, and we source the right startups, to do that, and we try to build those, this relationship between a business line and a startup to do a proof of concept in a very short period of time and do real things. And at the end of this period of time, of course, the idea is to make sure to have a high rate of transformation between proof of concept into production, products. So I think that this era is very exciting because I think we now have given up the posture of banks are dinosaurs, startups are wonderful, and I think we're just converging towards something more efficient in terms of business.
So this cooperation from your side is mostly looking for a startup that fits to your bank or that fulfills certain requirements that some part of the business of your bank now has.
Yeah, I think actually we do three things. Just what you described, just to spot, the difficulties, the customer journey pain points, things we want to really tackle. Okay, that's one thing. And also we give room for serendipity. Find things we were not looking for, and trying to do some exploration with startups, even if we don't have a specific need. So it's more R&D, and also we invest in money into dedicated funds and cyber and AI, to early position the bank, with the best startups and the best technology, even if we haven't identified, a specific need. So we're really trying to cover the very short term and the middle term of our strategy roadmap.
Thanks, Szymon. I want to ask about one biggest thing that you are now try to innovate in your bank. So the biggest challenge that now you are facing.
Oh, there's plenty.
But if you could select just one main point,
okay,
or one main thing.
I think agile will be the one. Right now we've completed, I would say, after a year of trials and error, we completed the process of implementing agile into the structure. As far as I know, we are one of these banks that has full implementation of agile. So it's not agile implemented on IT side or on business side, it's actually combined. So we totally changed the paradigm, we shifted the paradigm how we work. And we had a chit chat with Michał before, and I said that the implementation of agile actually is an agile process as itself. So there's a lot of struggle, there's a lot of back and forth, but we're moving forward.
And what tools do you use to obtain this goal, or to?
Scrum. So we're going with the Scrum methodology for agile.
Okay.
And it's tricky, to be frank and honest. And it kind of resembles to the previous questions and what Laurent says, is that the era, and I fully agree with this, the era of talking about fintechs in this honeymoon approach is kind of over. So we had this time where everybody was passionate about fintech. So there are fintechs, and the fintechs do amazing stuff. The only thing is that right now we're going to this place where we need to find a way to actually make them commercially available. So to put them into scale, to find a way to benefit on them. Mm-hmm. Right? At the end, it's a business.
Okay.
And that becomes tricky. And on one hand side, organizational-wise, going back to your question, we're changing the structure to enable faster pace of innovation. This is the reason why we're implementing Agile, why we implemented Agile. On the other hand side, we do a lot of exercise to find proper fintechs. And if you take a look at them, some of them is based on, actually, majority of those who achieved success up to the level in every country are based not so much on really innovative ideas. It's actually much more based on flaws of local banks.
You mentioned scaling of fintechs, and as a person from the Polish part of the bank. Do you think that scaling only to entire Poland onto many clients in Poland is enough, or do you think that it is necessary for also the Polish banks to try to advertise the fintech that you have, that you invested, that you developed, required to be used by also some other parts of, for example, your organization?
Well, in ING, we definitely prefer to have it scale up, so to the level of multinational solutions, although it heavily depends on the fintech.
And do you have any experience of the Polish fintech that you scale up to the other countries as well?
I have examples of Polish solutions that we scaled up, yes.
Okay.
Right, so for example, the PFM solution we have, the engine of PFM, is something we scaled up in the multinational level. Do we have fintechs as such? Now here comes a very interesting question: how do we cooperate with fintechs? Right? The objective we have is not to scale up the company. It can be one of the possible solutions that you go into cooperation with a startup. You raise up the startup, you buy the startup, you cooperate with the startup. The other one is that you actually buy a technology itself, or you invent it up to the level we want to also become a startup. Going to Moran's speech, he said 40,000 developers, 15,000 developers, correct? This is huge power to actually invent on your own, if you only create a proper space. Right? Invention rarely comes from technology knowledge. It more comes from the approach and the attitude. Okay, I think major task is organizational culture.
So, Moran, I know that because you told me 20 minutes before that you invest in fintech startups, but only if you see that you can cooperate with them and that you, as HSBC, can use their services. So how do you convince other branches of HSBC than the London branch to use the English fintech that you invested in?
Okay, so we're based in the UK, but we invest globally, so it could be anywhere. We cover kind of range of, let's say, maturity of startups. So we have footprint in various accelerators in London, Hong Kong,
But is
Israel,
it only a decision of the global CEO that calls some people in the branches and say, look, we have this startup?
No. So I can give an example of a company that we invested in, which is called Visolution. The company basically is a digital channel to communicate with clients. So it's an effective way of onboarding clients as well. We started in the UK. And as part of the investment process, we actually encouraged them and helped them to open their offices and grow in Hong Kong, which was a completely new market for them. So that's one example of a company that we took to the Hong Kong.
This is how you convince the fintech, the startup, to do something. And
yeah, for a startup to get HSBC as a client in Hong Kong is a big opportunity.
But how to convince Hong Kong branch of HSBC to use this fintech? Because I think that this is something that we, as or people from the Polish banks, can face. How to convince their colleagues from other foreign branches of their banks to use the fintech that was developed in Poland or that was founded in Poland, as a partner of a Dutch branch or Asian branch or some other in some other countries.
At HSBC, and I'm sure it goes for the other banks as well, once a certain solution is onboarded, it's a lot easier to actually then proliferate it internally. A lot of the hurdles are actually out of the way, and if it's onboarded in the UK, other businesses or other parts of the business would be happy to look at it and make their own assessment of whether it's useful in their geography or in their product.
Laurent, do you have any tip?
Yeah. I mean, just if I may add, I mean, you can't impose to a business unit, to work with the startup because you have invested into the startup. Okay, and the way we try to do things is to do it, the proper way. I mean, you have this fiancé period where you're going to accelerate a startup within an acceleration program, do a proof of concept or MVP, and if things, go well, you want to move to production, and that might be a reason, to invest into the company, to finance through equity large development with the bank. I think things should work this way, and so the business unit is empowered, and the business unit is going to decide, if it makes sense, and because this business unit has been working with the startup, you can scale up within the company. I think one of the issue some financial institutions are facing is to invest upstream, even in very good companies, but there is no relationship or intimacy between that startup and the business unit.
Okay, thanks. Michał, I would like to ask you about any challenge or any difficulty that fintech companies should be aware of or should be prepared for if they, start to cooperate with banks.
Yeah, so something again from my story. Yes, I think the issue is when you are starting the startup, especially in fintech, and you would like to compete with the banks. It's really the matter of open talking with the banks. Yes, you have to be open with the banks, and you have to approach them with talks and try to explain what this product is doing and how it works, and how this product will compete with the products in the bank. Yes, I remember my time when I was opening an account, because we are acting as a kind of clearing mechanism. We have 16 banks in Poland on board with the accounts opened, and we are doing instant payments between those banks. Yes, so I had to be and talk with those banks to open an account, and it was really very complicated. And the Polish, let's say, sector is divided, because I have banks which are really cooperated. The cooperation is very open, and there are no problems. But there are some banks which are simply somehow do not want to cooperate with such a companies. I will mention again that we are currency conversion and the payments. This is the area of the aircounter.com. Yes, so you have to be open, talk with the banks, and try to explain them that
So communication is
is a key. Yes, it's a key.
Szymon?
I think again going back to this honeymoon over part with the new era, it's fairly easy to set up new banking business if you're not constrained by any regulations and compliance and rules, right? The only thing is that you cannot be scaled up yet again, right? So I think what we have to do as a banks and a fintechs is we need to find a common ground. So on the one hand side, we have fairly regulated, actually over-regulated up to the level banks that have to comply huge amount of rules that we have to be aware significantly decrease our pace of innovation. On the other hand side, we have fintechs that do implement new stuff very, very fast. And we need to find a common ground. We need to get faster, but at the same time, fintechs have to understand, if there's one thing they have to understand, is
so
that
moving from the garage to a high regulated business. Thanks a lot. Our time is up. I hope that our dear audience doesn't change their mind about the future of banks after our discussion. Thanks a lot, everybody.